My name is Riley Harmon, and the night they mistook me for catering was the night I realized some families don't forget you. They just rewrite you. I stood outside the Red Earth Pavilion in a navy dress I had to talk myself into wearing, clutching a hand-carved frame wrapped in recycled paper. Inside, the chandeliers glittered like approval. Warm, selective, expensive. The kind that always missed me by one seat. I walked in, past laughter sharp as crystal and waiters who moved like clockwork. My name tag, when I finally found it, was tucked behind a ficus, near the kitchen, always near the exits. I heard it before I saw them. Is that her? Still doing that little housing thing? Grant's really built something, hasn't he? I didn't flinch. I'd learned to build with silence. You don't need applause when you're laying foundations. But then, a stranger's voice cut through the curated air. Wait, are you the one behind Civic Hearth? The music didn't stop, but the moment did. And just like that, they remembered someone they had tried to forget. Before I tell you what happened that night, and what came after, let me know in the comments. Have you ever been erased by people who were supposed to love you? Tap like if you've ever had to rebuild your identity from scratch. And subscribe if you're done asking for a seat at the table and ready to build your own. The air outside the Red Earth Pavilion was crisp, tinged with the faint scent of mesquite and expensive perfume. My boots made a dull scuff on the stone walkway as I stepped forward, clutching the small box wrapped in recycled paper. From the outside, the event glowed like a movie set. Golden chandeliers reflected in the glass walls, jazz murmuring through the warm Arizona dusk. Inside, though, it would be cold in all the ways that mattered. I paused before the entrance. My reflection in the dark glass caught me. Hair pulled back, deep navy wrap dress that clung just enough. Not flashy. Never flashy. Just enough. I tucked the RSVP card back into my clutch, the one that had no personal message, no looking forward to seeing you, Riley. Just a name printed in generic font. Just protocol. As I stepped in, the foyer swallowed me whole. Laughter rang sharp against marble. Waiters in black ties swept by with flutes of champagne. I was met not by family, but by a second valet who glanced at my keys and blinked, unsure whether to park my beat-up pickup or ask me to move it. The seating chart was elaborate, names etched on leaf-shaped cards in elegant cursive. Mine, when I found it, was at the far corner by the kitchen corridor, a chair half-shielded by a potted ficus. I sat, spine straight, legs crossed at the ankle, clutch still resting on my knees like a shield. I heard it in the whispers before I even saw them. Is that her? I thought she didn't come to these things anymore. Still doing that little housing thing? Grant's done so well, though. What a contrast. I didn't flinch. I'd learned that at Cedar Rise, the small, quiet community I'd built with salvaged beams and volunteers with rough hands and softer hearts. You stop flinching after a while. You just listen. Grant arrived like a sunrise. Charcoal suit, open collar, easy grin. Everyone rose to greet him like gravity had shifted in his direction. Leon, my father, clapped a firm hand on his son's back and said, "Building a legacy just like we dreamed." He didn't look my way. He hadn't all evening. I slipped away to the gift table and set down my offering. A hand-carved photo frame with a note tucked inside. It didn't sparkle. It wouldn't be noticed. When I returned to my seat, I found a glass of water placed there, probably out of guilt or mistake. I sipped and scanned the room. My mother's laugh, tight and silver, floated through the air. I followed the sound and caught the words mid-glide. Well, at least she showed up in a dress this time, she said, hand-brushing an invisible crumb from her silk sleeve. I couldn't move, just breathed in slow and deep, letting the words settle into the layer of armor I'd worn for years. I looked down at my dress. The navy fabric didn't flinch either. Then, sorry to interrupt, but are you the founder of Stone Beam Collective? Wait, you're the one behind Civic Hearth? The music didn't stop. The air did. Aubrey stood there, a half-drained glass of rosé trembling just slightly in her hand, her eyes wide not with disbelief, but recognition. It was that rare kind of moment when someone looks at you and sees you. Not for who you've been told you are, but for what you've actually done. It burned hot and strange in my chest. I didn't answer immediately. My fingers tightened around the clutch in my lap, and my gaze flicked across the room, half expecting someone to snatch the words from the air and shove them back into silence. Instead, my cousin Mason was the first to react. He leaned across his plate, a smirk blooming across his smug face. "Civic what?" he asked. "That the nonprofit where you go build sheds in the woods with, I don't know, tree huggers?" There was a ripple of laughter from the nearby table. Not loud, sharp, private, the kind that eats away at you slowly. I swallowed once, slow and dry. It's a housing collective. Post-disaster rebuilds, sustainable infrastructure, mostly in underserved zones. My voice didn't shake. It just landed flat on the marble and slid away. Aubrey blinked. Wait. The one that did the modular homes in Kentucky after the floods? And the community center with the rainwater capture system in Espanola? I nodded. She was standing now. "I saw your TEDx talk," she breathed. "You spoke about rebuilding more than walls, building hope." More faces turned. One woman in green with lacquered nails leaned toward her husband and whispered something. Another man, a little too loud, said, "Did she say TEDx?" My mother's voice came through like a blade disguised as a ribbon. "Oh, that little presentation thing? It was more of a workshop, dear. Riley's always been good with, local causes." Mason chuckled, shaking his head. "Come on, guys. Let's not turn this into an infomercial. Grant's the one who got the Harmon Award last quarter. Real innovation, actual business." Aubrey didn't look at him. She was too busy piecing something together. "I remember now," she said slowly, as if the memory had been sitting on a shelf waiting to be dusted off. "There was a plaque at my grandma's community. Thanks to RH for making warmth tangible." My mouth parted slightly. Civic Hearth started as Radiant Homes. That plaque, it was one of our first builds. Her expression changed. The kind of change that made you feel suddenly seen from across the years and the miles. Just then, a younger woman, maybe a college student, moved closer with her phone tilted downward. She wasn't being discreet. She tapped record and pretended to check notifications, but I noticed the red light flashing. She looked vaguely familiar. Maybe one of the Santa Fe volunteers from years ago? And that was when it happened. A man near the bar tilted his head. "Wait, RH? That's her?" Another picked it up. "She's the founder?" The words floated and spread, small at first, then widening, like a match dropped in dry grass. I heard it echo back from 3 tables away, and I could feel the shift. Not a roar, just tension. Eyes flicked up from dessert forks. Conversations paused. Even the violinist missed a note. I took a shallow breath, folded my napkin, and said it plainly. "Yes, that's me." The air held still, suspended like it didn't know which direction to fall. Aubrey smiled faintly, not with pity, but with some quiet form of awe. She leaned in and murmured, "They left that part out of the family tree, didn't they?" "I know that voice," Aubrey whispered, scrolling through a TEDx video. I knew it the moment she said foundation. She was sitting cross-legged on her living room floor, a soft gray throw wrapped around her shoulders, eyes locked onto the screen. Riley's voice crackled through her laptop. Steady, low, with that slight lift on the word dignity that Aubrey hadn't even noticed the night of the party. But now, it landed like an anchor. The night had lingered in her chest all week. She couldn't shake the look in Riley's eyes. Not embarrassment, not shame. Something sharper, guarded, withheld. Like she'd spent years holding back a truth no one wanted. The video ended with a simple message. Home is not just shelter. its story, and everyone deserves one. Aubrey paused it on Riley's face, half lit by a red TEDx spotlight, and stared. This wasn't someone building sheds in the woods. This was someone rewriting narratives. Her phone buzzed. It was a new email, unmarked except for the subject line. Thank you, RH, no sender name, just the initials -C. She hesitated, then clicked. I thought you might want to see this again. Some stories deserve to surface. See below was a photo attachment. Aubrey opened it. The resolution was poor, but the emotion bled through. A young woman, face turned away, hoodie half up, work boots caked in clay, standing beside a small, angular house framed in reclaimed timber. On the porch sat an older man holding a thermos, grinning like the world had turned right again. The metadata was dated 2 years ago. Location, Tucson, Arizona. Civic Hearth build number. 7, the plaque read in faded paint. Aubrey leaned closer. She couldn't see Riley's face. But the curve of her shoulders, the poise even in rest, it matched the woman who'd sat near the kitchen corridor, napkin folded, eyes flicking but never pleading. She exhaled, slow, then clicked save. Meanwhile, in a boardroom 4 states north, Grant Holloway rubbed his temple as lines of permit data scrolled across the conference screen. Why are we blocked in Vista Zone again? He asked his assistant, tapping his pen. She flipped to a flagged report. Something about non-standard infrastructure claims. Third-party disruption. Grant squinted. What third party? The assistant zoomed in on a line buried in system logs. RH is disrupting Vista Zone permit progress. Remove from priority routing. Who's RH? He asked out loud, mostly to himself. The room gave no answer. He frowned, leaned back, and marked the line. Later, he'd transfer this file, just in case, to a private USB. He didn't know why yet. Just a gut. Back in her condo, Aubrey printed the RH email and the photo. She stared at the document tray as if it might explain something she hadn't yet named. Something wasn't adding up. Riley's name had never come up in family accolades. Not in board reports. Not at dinners. Not even a casual mention. And yet, she opened her bookmarks and searched for Cedar Rise Permitting Archive. She knew enough about land development to know these files weren't public, unless someone had leaked. 15 minutes later, she'd found a mirrored backup of Holloway's internal marketing archive, an old link shared by a past PR intern during a university talk. Buried 3 folders deep, there it was again. RH. Not Riley Harmon. Just 2 letters. But over and over again, those 2 letters showed up near blocked approvals, flagged zones, and one glaring headline from an internal newsletter. RH's modular uprising threatens Holloway's model. It was personal. She opened her notes app and typed a single question. Is Riley RH? She stared at it for a while, then deleted the question and wrote it again, bold this time. Later that night, she called Riley. Hey, she said gently. Hey. There was a long pause. Riley's tone held its usual calm, but underneath, Aubrey heard a small shake, like a tremor behind the words. Aubrey didn't waste time. Are you RH? The silence that followed didn't last long, but it was long enough. Riley didn't answer. And that said everything. Aubrey closed her laptop with trembling hands. She opened the top drawer of an old media cabinet, searching through outdated chargers and stray photos until she found a worn DVD sleeve labeled in faded Sharpie. Nana, 2021 testimonial, Tucson build. She slid it into the tray of a dusty external player. The screen flickered, tracking issues buzzing. Then a grainy video. Her grandmother in a porch chair, blanket over her lap, whispering into the camera. Thank you, whoever you are. You rebuilt not just our home, but our story. Before we toast, Aubrey said calmly, stepping up to the mic, I have someone to thank. Someone who builds with heart. Her voice sliced clean through the polite murmurs and clinking cutlery of the Western Urban Development Forum, drawing attention not with volume, but with conviction. The ballroom froze mid-glance, mid-sip, mid-smile, as if instinctively sensing something unscripted was about to unfold. Just 10 minutes earlier, Grant had lit up the room with polished confidence. His slides gleamed with drone shots and buzzwords. Vertical sustainability, smart density, Vista 2.0. A few planners nodded. Some scribbled. Others leaned back, eyes glazed, familiar with this performance. His navy blazer hugged his frame just right, and when he said, "This is the future Holloway promised," the crowd actually applauded. Then came Riley. Quiet shoes, no spotlight requests. Her slides were minimal, a single image per thought. Children coloring on concrete blocks, a porch swing swaying beside a half-built wall. Her voice never rose, but each word landed like timber sunk into fresh soil. "I was taught that a home is where stories settle," she said, "not where branding begins." She stepped down to polite claps, not cold, not warm, measured. And now Aubrey was up, though her name hadn't appeared on any program. She took a breath, then clicked the remote in her hand. The screen behind her blinked, then flickered to life. An older woman in a porch chair appeared, blanket over her lap, eyes soft with memory. "Thank you," the woman whispered. "Whoever you are, you rebuilt not just our home, but our story." The logo flickered into view. Stonebeam Collective. Below it, in small text, founded by R.H. Riley Harmon. For a second, nothing moved. Then came the sound, barely audible, of someone inhaling too sharply. A fork clattered to the carpet. The tension moved across the room like current under the floorboards. Leon Holloway stood slowly, like a man not used to being surprised. His hands were clasped in front of him, jaw tight. "So that's where the money went," he said, loud enough for every corner of the room. "You've been playing savior while your family moves forward?" Riley didn't look at him. Not immediately. She looked at the screen, at the image of the woman she'd never met but somehow knew. Then she turned to her father. "Some things are worth saving," she said evenly, "even if they don't profit." A single camera flash exploded in the back. Then another. Journalists rose from their chairs, murmuring her name. Aubrey stepped down and began quietly handing out folded blueprints, Riley's early sketches from Cedar Rise. A city planner took one with trembling fingers. Leon opened his mouth again, but the noise of movement drowned him out. Then, Grant, still standing by the edge of the dais, walked forward. He didn't look at their father. He didn't look at the press. He stopped beside Riley, looked at her for a long, long moment, and said clearly into the mic, "She's the only one here who's never built for applause. She's built to last." "I'm not proud of what I said," Grant admitted, "but I'm proud of who I stood beside." His voice cracked the stillness of his own condo, a space stripped of the gloss and grandeur he used to take for granted. The walls were bare, the furniture minimal. A half-drunk coffee sat on a crate he now used as a table. He looked tired, but lighter somehow. Riley stood in the doorway, hands in the pockets of her long coat, unsure whether to sit or speak. She didn't. She let silence do the sifting. He rubbed the back of his neck. "I didn't know how much of it was choreographed until I stepped off stage." She still said nothing. He handed her a small USB. Simple, unmarked. "They built it on lies," he said, "and I'm done helping it stand." Riley took it. No nod. No thank you. Just a slow exhale as she placed the drive beside a lone brick sitting on her desk at Cedar Rise, the first brick of the first home she ever rebuilt, still flecked with old red clay. That morning, the press had exploded. Leon Holloway appeared on a business podcast in a crisp suit and tighter smile. "It's unfortunate when personal instability disrupts serious urban progress," he said. "Our family has always supported Riley's creative efforts. But leadership requires clarity." The host didn't push back. The next headline came with teeth. "Holloway Daughter's Secret Empire, Visionary or Vendetta." Aubrey called to warn Riley before it aired. "They're digging," she said quietly, "but someone else is planting." 2 hours later, a private message came to Aubrey's inbox from a locked Proton Mail account. No greeting, no sign-off. Just a file folder labeled Holloway Internal, 2022 to 2024. Inside, zoning manipulations, permit obstruction, backdated compliance waivers. A digital paper trail as damning as it was clean. One PDF was tagged with Riley's initials, RH, flagged as a disruption asset. She stared at the screen until her vision blurred. Grant showed up the next day. He didn't say much. Just the quote about pride, the USB, and then left with a nod. Later that night, Riley sat alone at Cedar Rise HQ. Snow painted the window edges in soft white. She pulled a weathered book from the shelf, Patterns of Shelter, a gift from her grandmother years ago. The spine cracked gently as she opened it. A folded note slipped out. "You don't need their legacy." It read in her grandmother's loopy cursive. "Build your own." The air in the room shifted. Just then, a knock sounded. Software rhythmic. Riley opened the door to find her mother standing there, wrapped in a dark scarf, clutching something. Neither spoke. Her mother handed her a photo. A young Riley sitting on a wood beam, barefoot, grinning beside her grandmother. Dust floated in the summer air like gold. Riley's mother looked at her, eyes glassy, lips pressed into the faintest curve of remorse, then turned and left. Riley didn't follow. She placed the photo next to the brick and the USB. A trinity of memory, proof, and fire. Her laptop pinged. New email. Subject line, Real Legacy, Real Foundations, from City of Flagstaff Redevelopment Office. Message, we'd like to discuss a long-term partnership with Cedar Rise. "Did you build our house?" the boy asked. "No," I said, kneeling beside him. "I just laid the first brick." His fingers traced the edge of the garden path, where our volunteers had inlaid leftover bricks into playful spirals. His sister tugged at his sleeve, pointing toward their mother, still clutching the keys, still trying to believe this was real. I stood and let the December air fold over me. It was sharp and quiet, not unlike the moment before a foundation is poured. All potential, all pause. The final walkthrough had been simple. Paint touch-ups, door hinges tested. Grant had tapped one of the frames with a mock-serious frown. "This one's crooked," he said. Clearly a rush job. I tossed him the leveler. "Then fix it." He caught it with a grin. He was no longer wearing Holloway blues. The Cedar Rise patch on his vest looked more lived in than official, but that was the point. We weren't building an empire, just homes. A local news crew had watched from the edge of the gravel lot earlier. They didn't interrupt, just filmed as families walked through rooms with slow, odd steps. One camerawoman wiped her eye when a toddler opened a kitchen cabinet like it was treasure. Later that evening, at a modest summit in Bozeman, I stood behind a mic that wobbled slightly and said, "We don't build with what shines. We build with what survives." The applause didn't echo. It landed. Steady. Real. I hadn't planned to speak long. Didn't need to. When I returned to the site the next morning, frost glazed the porch railings. Someone had left something wrapped in cloth beside the entryway. A small clay model, crude but careful, of a house. Familiar lines. Too familiar. I lifted it gently. "She had your hands," said a voice behind me. I turned. My mother stood 2 steps away, scarf pulled low, hair pinned in a style I hadn't seen since my childhood. She didn't look at me, just at the little house. Then she nodded once and walked back toward the road where her car idled. I didn't follow. I placed the model on the shelf inside the entry, where families would soon leave their own keys, coats, lives. Back at my desk, I opened my grandmother's notes, soft with age, sharp with clarity. Her handwriting wrapped around the margins like vines. I slipped each page into a new notebook. My name on the spine wasn't embossed, just inked by hand. Outside, the boy and his sister traced bricks in the garden. They once called me a shadow, an unspoken embarrassment at the edge of velvet chairs and carefully scripted speeches. In their eyes, I was the daughter who didn't fit, the one who built small homes instead of chasing big numbers. I was labeled the problem, never part of the solution. I never raised my voice. I raised walls, framed doors, laid foundations. Every house I built didn't need a ribbon-cutting ceremony. Every blueprint I followed served someone who needed shelter, not someone who needed status. I remember the day they moved my desk into the copy room. I folded my plans and walked out, without slamming doors or begging to stay. Some battles are fought quietly. The ones that matter most usually are. I didn't need them to believe in me. I just couldn't afford to forget who I was. Justice isn't a spotlight. It's a foundation. It takes time to settle. It requires weight to hold. And when it does, it lasts. When I stood on that stage, after Grant, after his sleek pitch, I wasn't there for revenge. I brought no fury, only a few images, a note scribbled in my grandmother's hand, and a video from an old woman thanking RH for rebuilding her life after the storm. And somehow, that was enough to stop the room. I didn't shout my name. Others said it for me. At last, and without erasing it from the family tree. I never needed an apology. They could keep their silence. But when Grant stepped to the mic, not caught between right and wrong, but choosing right, I smiled. He didn't do it because I was his sister. He did it because the truth deserves a witness. And when my mother left behind the little clay house I'd once sketched in chalk, without a word, just that, I understood. Some acknowledgments don't make noise. But they can't be undone either. I didn't win by tearing them down. I won because they couldn't tear me down. The girl they once called a failure had built something no one could dismantle, a legacy that didn't rely on a surname or inheritance. While others built for applause, she built for people to breathe, to rest, to begin again. Justice doesn't always arrive dressed in suits or announced by headlines. Sometimes it slips in like the last brick laid in the final home, steady, silent, and essential. When injustice is met with quiet resilience, even the proudest empires must bend. And when those who think themselves invincible laugh atop someone else's ruin, that's usually when the ground begins to crack beneath them. Not because someone screamed, but because the truth never stays buried forever. Thank you for staying with me through this story. If you've ever sat at a dinner table and felt invisible, if you've ever walked into a room full of people who knew your name but never your worth, then you already understand what this story was really about. It wasn't about revenge, or even recognition. It was about truth. Quiet, undeniable, and often buried beneath years of carefully constructed silence. I didn't build Civic, Hearth, or Stonebeam Collective to prove a point. I built them because I've seen what it means to have nothing. Not just no roof, but no space to be yourself. And I know the power of one solid door, one steady wall, one light that stays on when the world has gone dim. Some people inherit legacy. Others lay brick. I chose the latter, not because it was easier, but because it was real. They called me the daughter who disappeared. But the truth is, I was here all along, building futures out of forgotten places, stories out of silence, and homes that didn't need marble floors to hold dignity. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been the quiet one at the edge of the room, the one who's underestimated, overlooked, or rewritten, know this: you are not alone. And you are not broken. You're building something. Maybe quietly, maybe slowly, but something no one can take away. So leave a comment if you've ever had to walk away in order to heal, or if you've ever found your voice not by shouting, but by creating something that lasts. Hit that like button if you're tired of being asked to prove your worth, and ready to define it for yourself. And if you're still standing after being erased, if you're rebuilding from what they tried to discard, subscribe. This space is for us, the builders, the forgivers, the ones who stayed kind in a world that wasn't. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And most of all, thank you for believing that justice doesn't always roar, Sometimes it arrives like the final brick in a home built for someone who never thought they'd be seen again. That's what we build for. That's what we rise for. And that's what lasts. Riley.